Minister,
The
go ahead.
context is quite clear because don't forget the government is yet to tell the country what has been spent on Carifesta in 2025. In fact, it has yet to disclose a budget. And the Prime Minister, I believe, said that it would be irresponsible to say how much Carifesta costs when they are still paying suppliers, and this is what is being said. So the context of throwing a figure like that, relating it to 1981, in my estimation, is a precursor to prepping Barbadians to say, well, look, if that was spent in 1981, don't be shocked if the figure is close to that in 2025. And I
Yes.
think that is where the Prime Minister is, and they're very keen. As you know, the Barbados Labour Party is very good on PR, so
Mm-hmm.
they're very keen on setting the table for what has to be disclosed, because obviously what has to now be disclosed now is some figure that is certainly in that vicinity or a little below. I believe she did say though that they didn't spend that much. So that was like say, well, in 1981, we spent close to 20 something million. So we won't spend that much now. So therefore that justifies the spend. I think
Right.
that's the
That might be where she's going, and which
I
is
believe
why,
that's the analysis that is coming down the tube.
and it prompted me to go to look at what was happening, in the economy at that particular time. It made me. This is why I went and
But
tried
don't
to dig
forget,
up.
in 1981,
Yes.
the Barbados Labour Party was in office, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Prime Minister was then the Minister of Culture. I believe so at that time. And I mean, if you had to analyze even that spend in 1981, and you look around Barbados now to see what was the investment quality or benefits from spending that kind of money, you'll probably be very hard pressed to find it in terms of what benefit accrued to Barbados in terms of infrastructure, that is the creative sector infrastructure, and so on. So it is, to my mind, interesting and very revealing, this figure that has been cast. And of course, we understand the nature of cost benefit analysis, because
Yes.
you can't look at a figure without looking at the benefits. All right. And it'll be very interesting to get an expose on what that figure translated to then and what it would be translated to now.
Yes, most definitely. Well, if Dave, this what we have here, Dave, what are the other ones that we worked on today with the Excel file? That's this one, but this one here, people could take a screenshot of it, of this particular one. Well, here we go. Let's go through this here. So this is this is the one here, Miss, and we see your spend is going to be on this one as well, Mr. Lashley.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody's asking how much was spent in 2017 because they think we're not going to say everybody's is on here. So if you
Mhm.
look clearly, you would see Mr. Lashley in 1972 when it Carfest started 1972, right?
Yes.
Right, Guyana. It was their idea actually, and when 1972, and we don't have the figures there. There's nothing we could find, no information on the net for that. 1979, nothing. 1976 was Jamaica. 1979 was Cuba, and we don't have those figures. But in 1981, when it was said that there would have been it's like a resurgence of Carifesta, so they
Mhm.
were reviving it. All right, so I don't know if that's what I saw on the net. I leave that to you all. You will know, Mr. Lashley, than I would, and you can clarify that for the viewers. But the 11.9 million dollars was spent. Okay.
Right.
All right. The adjusted figure, if we were going to now in
And I want
yellow,
you to underscore that's 11.9 million US dollars, not Barbados dollars.
US.
Yes.
Yes, US dollars. Thank you. US dollars. Thank you, Mr. Lashley. And so the if we're going to adjust for inflation, that's about $42 million in today, in 2025. All right.
Mhm.
But remember, that and that's why we did the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio. And if you remember what it was for Barbados, um, at in that particular time in
Right.
1981. So remember, versus what it is now. All right.
Hmm.
So look at Trinidad and Tobago. They in 1992 they spent, and we needed to remind the people that that was a BLP government in
Right.
1981, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Trinidad, look what they spent. They're saying they spent $1.5 million. Okay, that's
And
nice. Mhm.
bear in mind that that is 1.9 million TNT dollars, right? And I believe the
Wait,
conversion
1.5 million US.
is that US. One
Yes,
point
yes,
no
we
US. Okay, okay.
yes.
I thought it was TNT dollars.
Mm-mm. US. Okay.
US. Okay.
In,
Right.
in in the yellow section, folks, is what is the adjusted figure.
Right.
If
Mhm.
adjusted for inflation.
Right.
Okay,
Yes. Okay.
right. But that today, in today's time, they would have spent 3.45 million in
Right.
today. Okay, important. We're going somewhere with this. All
Hmm.
right, let's look at 1995. We couldn't find those figures. In 2000, St. Kitts, Dave, right, thank you. St. Kitts, that's 2.3 something million, right? That they spent in 2000. And in today's time, that would be about 4.4 million US. And this is all US dollars we're dealing with, we're speaking of. In 2003 in Suriname, they did Carry Festival for 840,000 US. Not even a million, Mr. Lashley,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
In 2006, Trinidad and Tobago, again, they had it again, 5 million US. Okay, I want people to see the ballpark, Mr. Lashley, of what has been spending, what people have been spending, right?
Right. Hmm.
2008, Guyana, 4.9 million. 2013, Suriname, let's see that, $9 million. Okay.
Hmm.
Haiti, I didn't even realize Haiti had done it.
Yes,
Haiti
because
was,
we took the baton from Haiti. I was in Haiti at the time for Carifesta, and took the baton in Haiti, and then signaled that Barbados would be the next host of Carifesta.
yes. And we come to your year, Mr. Lashley,
Hmm.
2017, 4 million
Yeah.
US. So here we have, I wanted to see, just if you could just look at even the couple years ahead of 2017, if you just even look at 2018, what's that, 2008, Guyana 4 million, Suriname, the next one was 9 million, Haiti 5 million, Trinidad 5 million, or St. Kitts 2.3 million, 1.5 million. You understand, guys? I want us to get the ballpark of what we're
Right.
dealing with. And I think that this is important. I know why I think it is important, but I've been talking a lot. Over to you, Mr. Ashley.
Yeah. Well, but it's important to see the kind of trend. I mean, and I want to make it clear that the intention is not in any way to point a finger at the product Carifesta. Carifesta is a product that has been embraced by the Caribbean. It is a product of the CARICOM, um, secretariat, and it has been embraced by Caribbean people. Certainly, when we hosted it in 2017, and I want persons to believe, to understand that in 2017, Barbados was encountering the worst recession ever. Barbados was impacted by a world recession, and therefore money was very scarce. We had debt issues. That's why the debt to GDP ratio was so high, because in a large extent, that recession, which was fueled by what was happening in North America, left a dent in our tourism earnings. It left a dent in our international business earnings,
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that the country itself was impacted across all sectors. And that has never been experienced in Barbados before. And while there has been the criticism of how the government responded to that, that is the deal that we were served. Now, in that environment, certainly our approach, while we accepted the challenge of hosting CariFesta in 2017, was to exercise prudence in terms of our spend.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of decisions we took. That's why we were able to come in with that kind of budget. And remember that out of that was the total refurbishment of the Daphne Joseph Hackett Theatre and the Queen's Park buildings. So that expenditure is incorporated into that, and I believe that that project alone was probably over $2 to $3 million. So impacted in that, and also we did refurbishment of more than 10, 12 schools. Commonwealth, for example, Leicester Vaughan, all of those cultural spaces were improved. The Barbados Community College as well. So we invested that money in existing plant, and we opted not to go into major capital expenditure, right? Because of what was happening in the economy. So that is why you will see there. And I believe that that has been the approach for most Caribbean countries. Yes, we will host Sky Festa, but we want to do it within a disciplined framework, within our means. Now, if in fact the government, when it came into office, they certainly chastised the government, the Democratic Labour Party, for having such a deficit position,
Mm-hmm.
and also the debt to GDP ratio, which of course was captured within a recession. So if that is what we're dealing with, trying to bring the debt to GDP ratio down, then to incur huge amounts of money in expenditure without some kind of practical um, control would be bordering on being irresponsible. And remember, the other thing is that when the government came into office, there was much hullabaloo about the debt to GDP ratio. In fact, the government felt so strongly that it said it would put in place legislation to control the management of money in the public sector in particular. You may be familiar with the I think it's called the Public Financial Management Act, I believe, that was implemented with some very 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 serious control measures in there. In fact, one of the things that was in there, that you could not have or embark on a project without a proper budget, and
Mm.
you could not expend the government funds outside of that budget without having some serious explanations for it.
I've
If you
heard of
also
that. I've heard of that, but I've never looked at it. Tell me the
you never
name of
looked
it.
at that,
I want to research it. What's the name of it?
right? It's called the. I made a note here. It's called the Public Finance Management Act of 2019,
Okay.
and under that particular legislation, there's some significance. If you look at section 31(4) of that
Mm-hmm.
act, for example, persons such as CEOs and accounting officers within the government, if they breach that act in terms of overspend, or they did something that was not within a budget, then in fact they could be penalized in money terms. They call it penalties. They call it a surcharge. There could be
Mm.
surcharge for that, and unbudgeted commitments are totally, um, dissuaded from unbudgeted commitments. So if you put the context of that legislation within
Mm-hmm.
the context of what the Prime Minister would have disclosed to Barbadians, that we don't know, we can't tell you what the budget is, we can't tell you what the spend is, because we are still paying suppliers. Then the question, if you don't have a budget, certainly they have not revealed a budget, you can't say what the spend is, then one can surmise that the government, as it relate to Carifesta, engage in unbudgeted financing. And if that is the case, then they are in breach of their own legislation. Now, the other thing about it is that, remember, there's the BERT plan, the BERT plan, which was
Yes.
you hear the governor of the central bank talking a lot about it. that was designed especially as an IMF control measure to put a check on, runaway finances in the public
Mhm.
sector, and
Mhm.
to ensure that what is budgeted by Parliament was spent, and that if in fact there had to be excess, there had to be explanation. So, and I think that these things are very good financial tools. They are good safeguards. So when we look at Carifesta in terms of what that particular legislation is saying and what the Burt plan was saying, then I asked the question: whenever this budget or this spend is released, the next question would be, were those funds budgeted for? Were they approved by Parliament? And if not, then who is responsible or accountable for the overspend? It means that somebody would have authorized expenditure in a situation, in circumstances where those expenditures were not approved and budgeted. All right. And that's all we're saying. We love Carifesta. We're just saying that within the context of the government's own benchmarks,
Mhm.
questions have to be raised as to whether or not the government itself did not engage in an activity that was in breach of the law. And that is serious because if you look at that legislation, the government is required fiscally every year to lay before Parliament a document. I believe it's called a I have it here too. Let me just pull it up quickly.
Mhm.
Uh,
And
it
and
is
while he's doing that, I want to say we're trying to find section 34.4.
Oh, you found it?
Well, I think Dave found the Public Finance Management Act, and he's trying to find that section
Right.
to show the viewers, because we like to educate our people. I am learning about it for the
Right.
first.
That section is certainly speaks to the penalties and so on.
To the
Uh,
penalties. Yes, somebody was asking, and to remind the viewers
it
too.
is actually 31 4.
Oh,
That's the
31.
31 4.
31 4, Dave, if you could find
31 4.
that.
And if you pull that
30,
up, certainly the
yes, if we
viewers
can,
can see
yes.
that.
And to
Um,
remind, we need to remind the viewers that the budget, according that was given to us in, it's what, April, was 4 million, was $4 million, right? Was four
right.
million Barbados dollars
Of
for
course.
Caripesto
That is what I think I saw in the estimates in
in the
Parliament.
estimates, the
And
estimates. So
if you look at that legislation, you will see that it has responsibilities for the ministers and what the minister can or cannot do. In fact, in Section 9, if you deviate from the fiscal objectives that are set in Parliament, you have to give solid reasons for it. The government may do that, but only in circumstances where there are situations that were not envisaged. So if you had a hurricane, if you had a disaster, if you had something that was not could not be conceived of, those are the circumstances in which the government can deviate from those fiscal objectives, which are the ceilings that are set.
yes,
Now, one would have to say whether or not there was anything within the Carifesta arrangement that was on could not have been predicted, and that would fall in line of the exception in Section 9 of that Act. So these are questions that have to be raised, because I think the government, very rightfully so, would have come into government with some very stringent objectives in terms of fiscal management and control, budgetary control, which are required, because I believe the objective that the government has set would be to bring the debt to GDP ratio of Barbados um, to within that 60% that you're talking
yes,
about
you're correct.
by
That
the
is,
by the
yeah,
year 2030. So
yeah.
we have a particular objective to bring that debt to GDP ratio uh, into that 60% area by 2030, which means that every year that debt to GDP ratio must be coming down. It can't be going up. Now we had a situation where when we had the ashfall and we had COVID, and if you look at the statistics around that time, those were exceptional circumstances. So while the debt to GDP ratio was coming down prior to that, it shot right up during COVID and during the ashfall for obvious reasons.
Yes.
So I think based on the benchmark set by government, every Barbadian, including us in the Democratic Labour Party, we are not exempt from that. We were faced with situations in when we were in office, uh, recessionary times that caused it to go up significantly. But we all have an interest in ensuring that there's our checks and balances and explanations, because there could have been once, and without presuming what the government would say in relation to the expenditure for Carifesta. I think the first checkpoint that has not been adhered to is to release the information on the budget. We're not getting to the spend yet,
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
we need to know what the budget was. And if we know what the, because I think the government, no, yesterday, last week, could have said to Barbadians, the budget for Carifesta 15 was X amount of whatever it is, millions,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. Now, having seen or heard the budget, then we could then begin to talk about what the spend is. It is almost like you're not revealing either figure.
Nothing.
So
But I want.
if you say what the spend is without revealing in advance what the budget was, it is not made for proper analysis or reasoning. So you need to know what the budget. I think the government can say now, right now, what the Carifesta budget was, and leave it there. And by the time all the suppliers that the prime minister have to be paid, when they're paid either by now and next year or whatever, then you could release that figure, and then we could then compare. Well, you did say in September 2025 the budget was X, and you're not revealing what the spend is. We can then make an extrapolation to say whether you've reached the budget or not. But none of that has come, So that alone, in my view, amounts to a significant breakaway from the legal obligations under that particular legislation we're talking about, because it is not a prudent financial approach to not tell the country what the budget is or not have a budget. So that is a bit disappointing for me. Um, and in fact, we know that there have been some capital projects in Carifesta. I went to the Performing Arts Center at Newton for an event there, and I'm not telling you that I don't certainly embrace the concept of a performing arts center. Yes, but the question is, I also need to know what the cost is. I need to know whether it was budgeted, whether it was a gift to Barbados, whatever it was. And my concern has always been, because if you engage in capital spending in a manner that is reckless, in other words, you had 2 years to plan Carifesta, but you wait until the last minute to rush these projects and engage contractors at exorbitant last minute rates. That is not a reasonable and responsible exercise of your public financing responsibility. In other words, you could have probably gotten that built, and I'll just use it arbitrary figures. You may have gotten it built for $2 million, but because of the inadequate planning and reckless planning, in my view, you probably have to spend $5 million for it. So while you can boast, because these are the things that I think people need to look to beyond these super concerts, which of course the government turned into super fets. Our approach in 2017, we had super concerts too. But we said to the delegations, if you're bringing in super artists, it is your responsibility to pay for those artists. We are not going to take up the taxpayers' money and pay for super artists. So those countries who wanted super artists brought them in at their own cost. And we had super concerts. In fact, I was almost about 2 or 3 feet from the prime minister, who was having a good time at some of these super concerts. And of course, having a good time, and I think she attended quite a few of them. The next couple of days, she went and told Barbadians that she was embarrassed to be a Barbadian because Carifesta was a flop. So that contradictory terms being used, but at the end of the day, it has to do with how you manage these things. Delegations, for example, had to pay their way; they had to pay for the accommodations and so on. We made sure, and we did have very early meetings with the hotel sector. And that's the contrast. I mean, somebody said to me, well, they had somebody from a delegation who was staying in a school for Carifesta 15, and they called them to ask for assistance because they were not provided with the basic necessities to survive. What we did, we had the hotel association and those people in on meetings more than a year before Carifesta in 2017. None of the delegations had to stay at any schools because were accommodated in our hotels. What that meant, that translated into earnings for the hotel sector. So there was you talk about the economic benefit. The hotel sector benefited directly because they had persons from Carifesta in their rooms. The taxi operators, because if you ask the average taxi operator in Barbados how did they benefit from Carifesta 15, many of them would be hard done to tell you whether or not they were able to benefit. So I believe if we get into the cost benefit analysis, it could very well be that the expenditure incurred by the government was worth it based on the cost benefit analysis. But if we don't have the information, Barbadians cannot engage in a proper cost benefit analysis. And I suspect, based on the information that I've heard, that if the final figures are given honestly to Barbadians, there would be quite a bit of embarrassment to the government. Because you see, the where the divide is, my notion of a successful Carifest is not necessarily having, 15,000 people, Barbadians, at a free fete and having a good time. It is the quality and it is the legacy. And if you remembered in 2017, way before Carifest, I attended a COSOD meeting in Guyana, which is a meeting of ministers of culture. And we sat and we deliberated on what could be the theme for Carifesta. And we felt that the creative industries should be felt and in Carifesta, in future Carifestas. So that is why the Carifesta in 2017 in Barbados echoed the creative sector, because we felt very strongly that the time had come to translate what was happening in the creative sector into an industry that could be part of the diversification of the economy. And that's the problem. I mean, the only way you can deal with this debt to GDP ratio is to show that measure of confidence in the creative sector. And infrastructure is always welcome. That's why I said we are not quarreling with Carifesta, we're not quarreling with infrastructure. But the disclosure and accountability is what is missing from this whole scenario, right? And the rush to construct premises. I remember in 1981, you remember there was the structures at the NCF were done for Carifesta. They used the same tech material that I believe they've used at the Carifesta village in Waterford. And if you ask me now, where are the structures that money was spent on at the NCF compound? And you can't see any. They disappeared because they had to be taken down because they were destroyed by high winds. So,
Wow.
so
So
I think.
this was done. This is why the history is so important. This was done. What we're seeing there at Waterford in 1981, when under their administration, when they spent a whole lot of money, 11 million
Mhm.
US dollars, they did put
Yeah.
up structures there, but
Yes.
and there were 10 structures that were destroyed by
At,
high
at
wind.
the at the NCF compound where it
Oh,
currently is
wow.
over there in St. James, there were structures there, and those structures were torn apart by high wind. But that is money. That is why those structures were never inherited by Barbadians, because that money did not translate into long-lasting investment structures. And
Very
my question is whether these structures that are currently there, enough technical know-how went into them. I can tell you, somebody said to me, I was not there, but somebody said that when in the beginning stages of the Grand Market, the covering was such that lots of water, when the rain fell, the place was soaked because it was not, and of course, very certain people in very high positions.
I was told that by a vendor as well, but go ahead.
Exactly. So, and then after, well, they sought to correct things as you go. I believe that I was told certainly Prime Minister and the Minister had to rush down there, along with the senior minister responsible for infrastructure, to try to somehow get this thing sorted. So we have to put the watch on what will happen to this structure here that has been put up. I do understand that the property, the land on which the Grand Market, the Super Grand Market, has been constructed, it is not owned by the government as we speak. I
Mm.
understand that the government is now engaged in discussions with the owner to purchase the property. So you had public funds being expended on land that the government did not own. And now I'm waiting to hear the announcement as to what the government will have to spend or will have to pay to this owner to secure the land upon which this huge structure is built. So you're working from the answer back. It is not responsible. It is not prudent financial management.